Welcome to a story that will grip your heart from the very first moment. If you're ready for an emotional journey of unexpected bonds and redemption, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the abandoned warehouse district, each drop echoing like gunshots in the empty streets of Chicago's South Side. Vincent, the Viper. Torino adjusted his black leather gloves as he stepped out of the dimly lit meeting room, his steel-gray eyes scanning the shadows that danced between the flickering streetlights. At 35, Vincent commanded respect through fear alone. His reputation preceded him like a dark cloud, ruthless, calculating, and utterly without mercy. The scar running from his left temple to his jawline served as a permanent reminder of the last person who had tried to betray him. That man's body had never been found. The meeting tonight had been particularly tense. Representatives from 3 rival families had gathered to discuss territory disputes, each man armed and suspicious. Vincent's presence had been the only thing preventing the discussion from erupting into violence. His reputation as a mediator was well earned. When Vincent Torino spoke, people listened because the alternative was often fatal. The warehouse itself held memories for Vincent. It was here, 15 years ago, that he had made his first kill as a young soldier in the Torino organization. The man had been skimming money from protection rackets, thinking his connections would protect him. Vincent had proven him wrong with a single bullet to the head. The lesson had been clear. Loyalty was everything, and betrayal was a death sentence. "Boss, the car's ready," Marco, his lieutenant, called from across the wet pavement. The black Mercedes sat gleaming under the pale streetlight, its engine purring like a predator waiting to strike. Marco had been with Vincent for 8 years, ever since Vincent had saved him from a rival family's torture chamber. The man's loyalty was absolute, forged in blood and tested by fire. Vincent nodded curtly, his mind already focused on the next phase of tonight's operation. The Castellano family had been encroaching on his territory for months, and tonight's meeting had been the final warning. Tomorrow there would be consequences. He had built his empire through careful calculation and swift retribution, and he wouldn't allow anyone to mistake his diplomatic efforts for weakness. As he approached the vehicle, his polished Italian shoes clicking against the wet asphalt, a small figure emerged from behind a rusted dumpster. Vincent's hand instinctively moved toward the Glock concealed beneath his tailored jacket, but he paused when he saw what had caught his attention. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, stood in the rain. Her clothes were nothing more than tattered rags, a oversized sweater with holes at the elbows, jeans that were more patches than original fabric, and sneakers held together with duct tape. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles around a face that was far too thin, her large brown eyes reflecting a wisdom that no child should possess. She stood with the stillness of someone who had learned that sudden movements could mean danger. "Hey, kid," Marco called out harshly, his hand moving toward his weapon. "Get lost." "This ain't no place for—" "Don't start the car," the girl whispered, her small hand reaching out to tug at Vincent's expensive coat sleeve. Her touch was gentle but urgent, like a bird landing on his arm. Vincent looked down at her, his expression unreadable. In his world, children were either leverage or collateral damage. He had no patience for strays, no matter how pathetic they appeared. Yet something in her eyes gave him pause, an intelligence that seemed far beyond her years, a desperation that spoke of genuine fear rather than manipulation. "What did you say?" The girl's grip tightened on his sleeve, her knuckles white with desperation. "Please, mister, don't start the car. They're waiting." Her voice was barely audible over the rain, but each word was clear and precise. "Who's waiting?" Vincent's voice was dangerously quiet, the tone that usually preceded violence. He had survived in this business by trusting no one completely, but something about this child's manner suggested she wasn't lying. "The men with guns," she said, pointing toward the shadows across the street. "I saw them. They put something under your car when you were inside. Something that ticks." Her small finger trembled as she pointed, but her voice remained steady. Vincent's blood turned to ice. His eyes followed the girl's pointing finger, and there, barely visible in the darkness between two abandoned buildings, he caught the glint of metal. A rifle barrel. Professional positioning, clear line of sight to the car. This wasn't random street crime. This was a coordinated assassination attempt. "Marco," Vincent's voice cut through the rain like a blade. "Step away from the car, now." "Boss, what? Now?" Marco jumped back just as Vincent grabbed the girl and dove behind a concrete barrier. The explosion that followed lit up the night sky like a miniature sun, the shockwave shattering windows for 3 blocks in every direction. Twisted metal and burning debris rained down around them as Vincent shielded the small body beneath his own. The heat from the flames singed his hair, and he could feel fragments of glass and metal bouncing off his back. When the ringing in his ears subsided, Vincent could hear the rapid footsteps of the would-be assassins fleeing into the night. Professional killers, smart enough to have an escape route planned. He slowly lifted his head, looking down at the girl who had just saved his life. She was trembling but unharmed, her eyes wide with shock but not surprise, as if violence was nothing new to her young life. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. "Lily," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear but not of him, of the world that had just tried to kill them both. Vincent studied her face in the orange glow of the burning car. This child, this nobody from the streets, had just done what his own security team had failed to do. She had seen the trap, recognized the danger, and risked her own safety to warn him. In his world, such loyalty was rare and precious. "Where are your parents, Lily?" "Don't have any," she said simply. "Been on my own since I was 5. The matter-of-fact way she delivered this information spoke volumes about the life she had lived. 3 years. This child had been surviving on the streets for 3 years. Vincent felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he had thought long dead. "Where do you sleep?" "Wherever it's dry," she shrugged, as if homelessness was the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes the old subway tunnels, sometimes doorways. Depends on who else is around. Vincent made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Not anymore. You're coming with me." As sirens wailed in the distance and the flames continued to consume what remained of his Mercedes, Vincent Torino, the man who trusted no one, found himself placing his hand protectively on the shoulder of a little girl who had just proven that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The Torino mansion sat like a fortress, on the shores of Lake Michigan, its imposing stone facade and wrought iron gates designed to keep the world at bay. The estate sprawled across 15 acres of meticulously maintained grounds, complete with gardens, a private dock, and security systems that rivaled those of government facilities. As Vincent's backup car pulled through the security checkpoint, Lily pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared at the sprawling estate. The mansion itself was a testament to Vincent's success. 3 stories of imported Italian marble and hand-carved woodwork, with 42 rooms that included a library, a wine cellar, and a private gymnasium. It was a far cry from the modest row house where Vincent had grown up, back when his father had been nothing more than a low-level enforcer for the old Torino boss. "This is where you live?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where we live," Vincent corrected, surprising himself with the words. He had never shared his space with anyone, not even his most trusted associates. The mansion had always been his sanctuary, his fortress against a world that constantly threatened to destroy him. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, where Mrs. Elena Vasquez, the housekeeper, waited with her arms crossed and a stern expression on her weathered face. She had worked for the Torino family for over 20 years, first for Vincent's uncle, then for Vincent himself after he had taken control of the organization. She had seen him grow from an angry young man seeking revenge for his father's murder into the calculating leader he had become. Elena had witnessed Vincent's darkest moments, the nights when he would return home covered in blood, the periods when paranoia kept him awake for days, the gradual hardening of his heart as the violence of his world took its toll. She had also seen glimpses of the man he might have been in a different life, moments of unexpected kindness that he quickly suppressed. "Mr. Torino," she said in her thick accent, her dark eyes taking in Lily's appearance with a mixture of concern and confusion. "What is this?" "Elena, this is Lily. She'll be staying with us." Vincent's tone brooked no argument, but Elena could hear something different in his voice, a gentleness she hadn't heard in years. "She needs clothes, food, and a room. See to it." Elena's expression softened as she looked down at the girl. Despite her stern demeanor, she had a grandmother's heart, and the sight of this thin, shivering child stirred her protective instincts. She had raised 6 children of her own before coming to work for the Torinos, and she recognized the signs of neglect and hunger. "Of course, Senor. Come, Nina, let's get you warm and fed." Elena's voice took on the gentle tone she reserved for wounded creatures, whether they were stray cats or broken men. As Elena led Lily toward the house, Vincent caught the girl's arm gently. "Lily, there are rules here. You don't go into my office without permission. You don't answer the door, and you never, ever talk to strangers about what you see or hear in this house. Understand?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I understand, Mr. Vincent. I'm good at keeping secrets." The way she said it suggested she had learned this skill the hard way, through experiences that no child should have to endure. Something in her tone made Vincent believe her completely. In his world, the ability to keep secrets was often the difference between life and death. And this child seemed to understand that instinctively. Over the next few hours, Vincent watched from his office window as Elena worked her magic. The housekeeper had drawn a hot bath, found clothes that would fit, though they still swam on Lily's tiny frame, and prepared a meal that could have fed a small army. Through the security monitors, he observed Lily's reactions to each kindness, the wonder in her eyes as she sank into the warm bathwater, the way she savored each bite of Elena's homemade soup, as if it might be her last. The child's behavior spoke of someone who had learned not to take anything for granted. She ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear. She touched the soft towels and clean clothes with reverence, as if they were precious artifacts. Most telling of all, she kept glancing toward the exits, mapping escape routes even in this moment of safety. "Boss," Marco's voice came through the intercom. "The Castellanos are claiming they had nothing to do with tonight." "Of course they are," Vincent replied, not taking his eyes off the monitor. "What about our other friends? The Russians are quiet." "Too quiet? And there's been chatter about the Morettis making moves on the docks." Marco paused. "Boss, about the kid, what about her?" "Some of the boys are asking questions. They don't understand why you brought her here. They're worried it might be a sign of weakness." Vincent's jaw tightened. In his world, any deviation from expected behavior was seen as vulnerability, and vulnerability was often fatal. But as he watched Lily carefully folding her old clothes despite their condition, he realized he didn't care what his soldiers thought. Vincent leaned back in his leather chair, his mind working through the possibilities. Someone had tried to kill him tonight, and until he knew who, everyone was a suspect. The fact that a homeless child had spotted the trap when his own security had missed it was both humbling and concerning. It suggested that his enemies had inside information about his movements and security protocols. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Lily entered hesitantly, transformed by Elena's care. Her hair was clean and braided, her face scrubbed pink, and she wore a simple blue dress that, while too large, made her look like the child she was supposed to be. In her hands, she carried a steaming mug, holding it carefully as if it contained liquid gold. "Mrs. Elena said you might want some coffee," she said, approaching his desk with careful steps. Her movements were precise, controlled, the behavior of someone who had learned that carelessness could have consequences. Vincent accepted the mug, noting how the girl's hands shook slightly. The coffee was perfect, strong and black, exactly how he preferred it. "Are you afraid of me, Lily?" She considered the question seriously before answering, her head tilted slightly as she studied his face. "A little, but you saved me too, so I think we're even." "How did I save you?" "You brought me here, gave me food and a warm place to sleep." "On the streets, that's everything." She paused, then added quietly, "Most people just walk past kids like me. Like we're invisible. Like we don't matter." Vincent studied her face, seeing a maturity that no 8-year-old should possess. "How long were you watching tonight? Before you warned me?" "About an hour. I was looking for somewhere dry to sleep when I saw the men. They were real quiet, real careful. But I'm good at hiding, good at watching. You learn to be when you're trying to stay safe." Her voice carried the weight of hard-earned experience. "What did you see exactly?" Lily's brow furrowed in concentration. 3 men. One stayed across the street with the long gun. The other 2 went to your car. They had a little box with wires. Took them maybe 5 minutes to put it under there. They knew what they were doing, moved like soldiers. Vincent felt a chill run down his spine. This child had observed a professional hit team at work and had the presence of mind to intervene. Her description matched the tactics of military-trained operatives, not street thugs or typical mob soldiers. "Why did you warn me? You didn't know me. I could have been a bad man." "Maybe," Lily shrugged. "But bad men don't usually dress as nice as you do. And you didn't yell at me or try to hurt me when I grabbed your coat. Bad men don't like being touched by dirty kids." Her simple logic was both heartbreaking and astute. Vincent realized that this child had developed survival instincts that rivaled those of his most experienced soldiers. She had learned to read people, to assess threats, to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. "Lily, I want you to understand something. The men who tried to hurt me tonight, they might try again. Being here, being around me, it could be dangerous." "More dangerous than sleeping in alleys and eating from garbage cans?" she asked with a sad smile. "I'll take my chances, Mr. Vincent." As Vincent looked into those wise brown eyes, he made a silent vow. This child had saved his life, and now he would do everything in his power to give her the childhood she had been denied. But first, he had to find out who wanted him dead, and make sure they never got another chance. 3 weeks had passed since the night that changed everything, and the Torino mansion had begun to feel like something Vincent had never experienced before, a home. Lily had settled into her new life with a resilience that both amazed and concerned him. She was too adaptable, too accepting of kindness, as if she had never expected to receive any. The transformation in both of them had been remarkable. Vincent found himself adjusting his schedule to accommodate Lily's needs, eating breakfast with her before she started her lessons, checking on her progress throughout the day, and even reading bedtime stories from the extensive collection of children's books that Elena had somehow procured. These simple domestic routines, which should have felt foreign to a man accustomed to violence and power, had become the anchors of his day. Vincent stood in the doorway of the mansion's library, watching as Lily sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, surrounded by books. The library itself was Vincent's pride, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with first editions, rare manuscripts, and leather-bound volumes that represented decades of careful collecting. It had always been his private sanctuary, but now he found himself sharing it willingly. Elena had discovered that despite her lack of formal education, the girl was remarkably intelligent and hungry to learn. She devoured stories with the same intensity she had once applied to finding her next meal. Her reading had progressed from simple picture books to complex novels in a matter of weeks, as if she were making up for lost time. "She's reading at a high school level," Elena reported, entering the library with a tray of afternoon snacks. "The tutor I hired says she's never seen anything like it. This child's mind is like a sponge." The tutor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, was a retired professor who had initially been skeptical about teaching the ward of a known crime boss. But Lily's eagerness to learn had quickly won her over. Vincent nodded, not surprised. Lily's ability to observe and analyze had already proven invaluable. Over the past weeks, she had pointed out security weaknesses in his home that his professional team had missed, noticed patterns in the behavior of his staff that suggested potential loyalty issues, and even identified a listening device that had been planted in his study by someone with inside access. The discovery of the bug had been particularly unsettling. It meant that someone in his inner circle was feeding information to his enemies, someone who had access to his most private spaces. Vincent had quietly removed the device and begun feeding false information through that channel, hoping to identify the traitor. "Mr. Vincent?" Lily looked up from her book. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." He settled into the leather armchair across from her, noting that she had been reading To Kill a Mockingbird, a choice that seemed both appropriate and ironic given their circumstances. Why do people want to hurt you? It was a question he had been dreading, but also one he knew she deserved an honest answer to. Vincent sat down in the leather armchair across from her, choosing his words carefully. In the past 3 weeks, he had come to realize that Lily's intelligence demanded respect, not condescension. "I run a business, Lily. Sometimes that business puts me in conflict with other people who want the same things I do. They see me as an obstacle to getting what they want." "What kind of business?" Her question was direct, without judgment, as if she were simply trying to understand the world she now inhabited. Vincent hesitated. "How do you explain organized crime to an 8-year-old?" "I help people solve problems that the police can't or won't handle. Sometimes I provide protection for people who need it. Sometimes I help settle disputes between different groups." It was the most sanitized version of the truth he could manage without outright lying. Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Like when Tommy Ricci was bothering Mrs. Chen at the corner store, and you had a talk with him and now he leaves her alone?" Vincent was startled. "How do you know about that?" The incident had occurred 2 weeks ago, a simple matter of a local punk harassing an elderly shopkeeper. Vincent had resolved it with a brief conversation that had left Tommy with a clear understanding of the consequences of continuing his behavior. "I hear things. Elena talks to the other ladies when she goes shopping. They say you're not like the other bosses. They say you actually care about the neighborhood." Lily's observation was astute. Vincent had always believed that maintaining good relationships with the community was essential for long-term success. It was true, though Vincent had never thought of it in those terms. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he had always believed that a strong community was good for business. Happy, secure people were less likely to cooperate with law enforcement, more likely to provide information about threats, and generally made better neighbors. Fear was a tool, but respect was more valuable. "The people who tried to hurt you," Lily continued, "they don't care about the neighborhood, do they?" "No, they don't." Vincent was impressed by her ability to grasp the fundamental difference between his approach and that of his enemies. Then, "They're the real bad guys." Her simple moral framework was refreshing in a world where Vincent was accustomed to operating in shades of gray. That evening, as Vincent reviewed security reports in his office, Marco burst through the door without knocking, a breach of protocol that immediately put Vincent on high alert. Marco's face was flushed, his breathing heavy as if he had been running. "Boss, we got a problem." "Big problem. What is it?" Vincent's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, a habit ingrained by years of survival. "The Morettis. They grabbed Tony Castellano's nephew this afternoon. Word is they're planning to pin it on us, start a war between our families." Marco's words came out in a rush, his usual composure shattered by the implications of what he was reporting. Vincent's jaw tightened. A war between the Torino and Castellano families would be devastating for everyone involved, including innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. The Castellanos controlled the north side, and their territory bordered his own. Open conflict would turn half of Chicago into a battlefield. "Where's the kid?" "We don't know yet, but our sources say the Morettis are planning to make it look like a revenge killing. They want the Castellanos to think we took him because of the territory disputes." Marco paused, his expression grim. "Boss, if this goes sideways, we're looking at a full-scale war. The other families will have to choose sides." A soft knock interrupted them. Lily peered around the door, her expression serious. "Mr. Vincent? I think I might know something that could help." Vincent gestured for her to enter, ignoring Marco's disapproving look. Over the past weeks, he had learned to trust Lily's insights, no matter how unlikely they seemed. Her unique perspective, shaped by years of survival on the streets, often revealed things that his experienced soldiers missed. "I was reading in the garden this afternoon," she began, "and I heard some men talking by the back gate. They thought no one could hear them, but sound carries funny around the fountain." The fountain she referred to was an ornate marble structure that created acoustic dead zones and amplified sounds in unexpected ways. "What did they hear?" Vincent asked, leaning forward. "They were talking about a warehouse by the river. Something about keeping someone there until tomorrow night. One of them mentioned the name Moretti." Lily's voice was steady, but Vincent could see the tension in her small frame. She understood the gravity of what she was reporting. Marco scoffed. "Boss, with all due respect, the kid could have misheard. Which warehouse?" Vincent cut him off, his eyes fixed on Lily. He had learned to trust her observations completely. "The one with the red door, near where the old train tracks cross the water. I used to sleep there sometimes before you found me." The admission that she had once sheltered in such a dangerous location reminded Vincent of just how precarious her previous existence had been. Vincent knew the location. It was in neutral territory, a place where the Morettis could operate without immediately implicating themselves. The warehouse had been abandoned for years, making it perfect for activities that required privacy. If Lily was right, they had just been handed the key to preventing a war. "Marco, get a team together. Small, quiet. We're going to take a look." Vincent's mind was already working through the tactical considerations, approach routes, escape plans, contingencies for various scenarios. "Boss, if this is a trap, then we'll deal with it. But if that kid is there and we can get him back to his family without bloodshed, we avoid a war that nobody wins." Vincent's decision was final, his tone brooking no argument. As Marco left to organize the reconnaissance mission, Vincent turned to Lily. "You did good, kid. Really good." She smiled, but then her expression grew worried. "Mr. Vincent, be careful. The men I heard, they sounded scared. Scared people do stupid things." Her wisdom, born from harsh experience, never ceased to amaze him. Vincent knelt down to her level, placing his hands on her small shoulders. "I'll be careful. I promise. But Lily, I need you to promise me something too. If anything happens to me, if I don't come back, Elena has instructions to take you somewhere safe. You'll be taken care of." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Lily said with the fierce certainty that only children possess. "I won't let it." Her declaration was both touching and heartbreaking, a child's belief that she could protect the man who had become her whole world. As Vincent prepared for what could be a dangerous night, he realized that for the first time in his adult life, he had something worth coming home to. The little girl who had saved his life had given him something far more valuable than he had initially understood. She had given him a reason to live. The warehouse district was shrouded in fog rolling off. Lake Michigan, creating perfect cover for Vincent's team as they approached the building with the red door. The industrial area had been abandoned for over a decade, a casualty of Chicago's changing economy, leaving behind a maze of empty buildings and rusted machinery that provided excellent concealment for illegal activities. Vincent crouched behind a shipping container, his team of 6 men positioned strategically around the perimeter. Each member of his crew was a veteran of countless operations, men who had proven their loyalty through blood and fire. Through night vision scopes, they had confirmed Lily's intelligence. The Moretti soldiers were indeed holding someone in the abandoned structure, and the security was lighter than expected. The building itself was a relic from Chicago's industrial past, its red door now faded and rust-stained. Vincent remembered when this area had been bustling with legitimate business, before economic decline and urban decay had turned it into a haven for criminal enterprises. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was now using the ruins of honest industry to prevent a war between criminal organizations. Through his earpiece, he could hear the steady breathing of his soldiers, each one a veteran of countless operations. But tonight felt different. Tonight, he wasn't just fighting for territory or respect. He was fighting to prevent a war that would destroy everything he had built, everything that made Lily's new life possible. "Boss, came the whispered voice of Sal, his sniper positioned on a nearby rooftop. "I count 4 guards outside, maybe 6 more inside. They're armed but sloppy. Looks like they're not expecting company." Sal was Vincent's most trusted marksman, a former Marine who had found his way into Vincent's organization after a dishonorable discharge for an incident he refused to discuss. Vincent smiled grimly. The Moretti's arrogance would be their downfall. They assumed that framing him for the kidnapping would be easy, that he would react with typical violence and give them the excuse they needed to unite the other families against him. They had underestimated both his intelligence network and his commitment to avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. "Remember," Vincent spoke quietly into his mic, "we go in quiet, get the kid, and get out. No unnecessary casualties. We're not here to start a war. We're here to prevent one." The distinction was important to Vincent. Every death would have consequences, ripple effects that could destabilize the delicate balance of power in Chicago's underworld. The operation unfolded with military precision. Vincent's men disabled the perimeter guards silently, using non-lethal methods that would leave them unconscious but alive. As they breached the warehouse, Vincent felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with high-stakes operations, but it was tempered by the knowledge that Lily was waiting for him at home. The warehouse interior was a maze of abandoned machinery and storage containers, providing plenty of cover but also numerous potential ambush points. Vincent's team moved with practiced efficiency, clearing each section methodically. The air was thick with dust and the smell of rust and decay, punctuated by the distant sound of Lake Michigan's waves against the nearby shore. Inside, they found exactly what Lily had predicted: Tony Castellano's 16-year-old nephew, bound and gagged in a makeshift cell constructed from shipping containers. The boy was scared but unharmed, his eyes wide with relief when he saw Vincent's face. The teenager had clearly been roughed up. His clothes were torn and dirty, and there were bruises on his face. But he was alive and alert. "Easy, kid," Vincent whispered as he cut the ropes. "We're getting you out of here." The boy's hands were raw from struggling against his bonds, and Vincent could see the fear and confusion in his young eyes. "Mr. Torino?" The boy gasped. "But they said you were the one who—" "I know what they said. They lied. Can you walk?" Vincent helped the teenager to his feet, noting that despite his ordeal, the boy seemed physically capable of moving under his own power. The rescue was proceeding smoothly until everything went wrong. As they prepared to leave, the warehouse suddenly flooded with light, and Vincent found himself staring down the barrels of a dozen assault rifles. The Morettis had been expecting them after all. The trap had been perfectly laid. They had used the boy as bait, knowing that Vincent's reputation for protecting innocents would compel him to attempt a rescue. "Vincent Torino," came a voice from the shadows, so predictable. Salvatore Moretti stepped into the light, his silver hair gleaming and his expensive suit immaculate despite the warehouse setting. At 62, he was old-school Mafia, a man who believed that respect came only through fear and that mercy was weakness. His presence here, personally overseeing the operation, indicated just how important this moment was to his larger plans. Moretti was flanked by his most trusted lieutenants, men whose reputations for violence were legendary even in Chicago's brutal underworld. Vincent recognized several faces, killers who had worked for various families over the years, mercenaries who sold their services to the highest bidder, Sal. Vincent nodded calmly, though his mind was racing through escape scenarios. "Fancy meeting you here." "Did you really think it would be that easy? That you could just walk in here and play the hero?" Moretti laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've gone soft, Vincent. Taking in strays, playing house with that little brat. It's made you weak." Vincent's blood turned to ice. Moretti knew about Lily. The implications were terrifying. If Moretti had intelligence about his personal life, then the threat extended far beyond this warehouse. "The girl has nothing to do with this?" "Oh, but she does. You see, while you're here playing rescue mission, my men are paying a visit to your mansion. Such a shame when accidents happen to children." Moretti's smile was cold and calculating, the expression of a man who had long ago abandoned any pretense of humanity. The threat to Lily shattered Vincent's careful control. With a roar of rage, he launched himself at Moretti, his hands reaching for the older man's throat. All tactical considerations vanished in the face of his fury. The only thing that mattered was getting back to Lily, protecting the one pure thing in his dark world. Gunfire erupted around them as Vincent's team engaged the Moretti soldiers, turning the warehouse into a war zone. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, muzzle flashes creating a strobing light show that turned the battle into a surreal nightmare. Vincent fought with a desperation he had never experienced before, driven by a love he was only now beginning to understand. He felt the burn of a bullet grazing his shoulder, but he didn't stop. Another round shattered a concrete pillar inches from his head, sending fragments of stone flying. All he could think about was getting back to Lily, protecting the one pure thing in his dark world. He fought with a savagery that surprised even his own men, as if the threat to Lily had awakened something primal within him. When the smoke cleared, half of Moretti's men were down, and the rest had fled. Moretti himself lay unconscious, blood trickling from a head wound where Vincent had slammed him against a concrete pillar. The old man's breathing was shallow but steady. He would live, though he would carry the scars of this encounter for the rest of his days. "Boss, we need to go," Marco urged, supporting Vincent's wounded arm. "Police will be here soon." The sound of sirens was already audible in the distance, growing louder by the second. Vincent nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to the mansion. As they loaded into their vehicles with the rescued Castellano boy, Vincent's phone rang. Elena's number appeared on the screen and his heart nearly stopped. "Elena, is Lily—" "She's safe, senor," came the housekeeper's shaky voice. "But there were men here. They tried to get in, but what?" The little one, she saw them coming. She triggered the security system and got us all to the safe room before they could breach the house. The police came and the men ran away. Elena's voice was filled with admiration and relief. "That child, she saved us all." Vincent closed his eyes in relief. Once again, Lily's sharp eyes and quick thinking had saved lives. The security system she had triggered was state-of-the-art, designed to seal the house and alert both private security and law enforcement simultaneously. "We're coming home." As they drove through the Chicago streets, Vincent realized that the night had changed everything. The Morettis had shown their hand, revealing themselves as the ones behind the original assassination attempt. More importantly, they had threatened Lily, crossing a line that Vincent would never forgive. But the little girl who had started as a debt of honor had become something far more precious. She had become family, and Vincent Torino protected his family with everything he had. The war that Moretti had wanted was coming, but it wouldn't be the war he had planned. This would be a war for the soul of Chicago's underworld, and Vincent intended to win it, not just for himself, but for the little girl who had taught him that even in the darkest places, light could still shine through. The emergency meeting of the Chicago crime families took place in the back room of Benedetto's restaurant, a neutral ground that had hosted such gatherings for over 50 years. The restaurant itself was a piece of Chicago history, its walls lined with photographs of politicians, celebrities, and notorious figures who had dined there over the decades. The back room, however, was where the real business of the city was often conducted. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension as the city's most powerful men sat around the mahogany table, their faces grim in the dim lighting. Each man represented not just a criminal organization, but a complex network of legitimate businesses, political connections, and community relationships that had taken generations to build. Vincent entered with his arm in a sling, the result of the previous night's warehouse battle. Despite his injury, his presence commanded immediate attention. The events of the past 24 hours had shifted the balance of power in Chicago's underworld, and everyone in the room knew it. To his left sat Anthony Castellano, whose nephew's safe return had shifted the balance of power in Vincent's favor. To his right, the empty chair that should have held Salvatore Moretti served as a stark reminder of the previous night's events. The Castellano family had been Vincent's rivals for years, But the rescue of Tony's nephew had created an unexpected alliance. Anthony Castellano was a man in his 60s, old enough to remember when honor still meant something in their world. The fact that Vincent had risked his own life to save a Castellano had not gone unnoticed. "Gentlemen," Vincent began, his voice carrying easily through the room, "we're here because someone tried to start a war based on lies." "Moretti's in the hospital," growled Frank Benedetto, the restaurant owner and neutral mediator. "Doctors say he might not wake up." "You want to explain that, Vincent?" Benedetto was one of the few men in Chicago who could speak to any family boss as an equal, his restaurant's neutral status giving him unique authority. "Gladly." Vincent placed a digital recorder on the table. This was found in Moretti's warehouse. His own words, planning to frame me for the Castellano kidnapping. The recording played Moretti's voice clearly. "Once we grab the kid and pin it on Torino, the families will have no choice but to unite against him. We'll carve up his territory between us, and I'll finally have the docks." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Anthony Castellano's face darkened with rage, his hands clenching into fists on the table. "That bastard used my nephew as bait. My sister's boy could have been killed because of his ambition." "There's more," Vincent continued. "Moretti was behind the car bomb 3 weeks ago. He's been systematically trying to eliminate the leadership of every family here, planning to take control of the entire city." Vincent had spent the morning gathering evidence, calling in favors, and piecing together Moretti's larger conspiracy. The evidence was damning. Financial records showing payments to out-of-town hitmen, communications with rival organizations in other cities, even preliminary agreements to divide Chicago's criminal enterprises among Moretti's allies. The old man's ambition had been his downfall. He had kept records, made recordings, documented his plans with the thoroughness of a man who never expected to be caught. "The son of a bitch was planning to sell us all out," muttered Carlo Ricci, the youngest family head at the table. "He had meetings scheduled with the feds, probably planning to trade information for immunity." "So what now?" asked another voice from across the table. "Moretti's finished, but his soldiers are still out there. Some of them might try to continue his war." "That's why we're here," Vincent replied. "I'm proposing a new arrangement. Instead of dividing up Moretti's territory and fighting over the scraps, we work together. Shared intelligence, coordinated operations, mutual protection." The suggestion was radical. The families had always operated independently, viewing each other as competitors at best, enemies at worst. But Vincent's proposal made sense in a changing world where federal investigations and rival organizations posed threats that no single family could handle alone. The old ways of doing business were becoming increasingly dangerous in an era of sophisticated surveillance and federal task forces. "And who leads this alliance?" Benedetto asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No one leads it. We're equals. But—" Vincent paused, knowing his next words would be crucial. "I have resources that could benefit everyone. Information networks, security expertise, and most importantly, the trust of the community." It was true. Over the years, Vincent had cultivated relationships with legitimate businesses, community leaders, and even some law enforcement officials who respected his code of honor. Unlike Moretti, who ruled through fear, Vincent had built his power on a foundation of mutual respect and shared prosperity. His territory was more stable, more profitable, and less likely to attract unwanted federal attention. The debate that followed was intense, with each family head weighing the benefits against the risks. Some saw Vincent's proposal as an opportunity to strengthen their positions, while others worried about losing their independence. The discussion continued for hours, with alliances forming and dissolving around the table as various scenarios were explored. The vote was closer than Vincent had hoped, but it passed. The Chicago families would work together, with Vincent serving as the coordinator of their joint operations. It was a position that carried enormous responsibility and even greater risk. He would now be responsible not just for his own organization, but for maintaining the delicate balance that kept Chicago's underworld stable. As the meeting broke up, Anthony Castellano approached Vincent privately. My nephew told me what happened in that warehouse. Said you could have left him and saved yourself, but you didn't? The kid was innocent. He didn't deserve to pay for our conflicts. Maybe, but I think there's more to it than that. Castellano studied Vincent's face carefully. Word is you've got a little girl living with you now. That changes a man's perspective on what's worth fighting for. Vincent didn't respond, but Castellano's knowing smile suggested no response was necessary. The older man understood the transformation that fatherhood could bring, even in their violent world. The drive back to the mansion gave Vincent time to think about what he had accomplished and what it would cost. Leading the alliance would make him the primary target for every enemy the families had, both within Chicago and beyond. The Russians, the Colombians, the federal task forces, they would all see him as the head of the snake. But as his car pulled through the security gates of his estate, Vincent saw Lily waiting on the front steps with Elena, and he knew he had made the right choice. The little girl who had saved his life deserved to grow up in a world where she didn't have to sleep in alleys or fear for her safety. Mr. Vincent! Lily ran to him as he stepped out of the car, her face bright with relief. Elena said you were in a meeting with important people. Did everything go okay? Everything went fine, kiddo. How was your day? Vincent knelt down to her level, ignoring the pain in his wounded shoulder. I finished 3 more books, and Elena taught me how to make pasta. Oh, and a lady came by to see you? She said she was from social services. Lily's expression grew worried as she mentioned the visitor. Vincent's blood chilled. What did you tell her? Nothing. Elena talked to her. But Mr. Vincent, she had papers. Official-looking papers. Lily's intuitive understanding of the threat was both impressive and heartbreaking. Elena appeared at Vincent's shoulder, her expression worried. Senor, we need to talk. Privately. In his office, Elena explained the visit from the social worker. Someone had reported that Vincent was housing an unregistered minor, and the state was beginning an investigation. If they couldn't prove that Lily was being properly cared for, or if Vincent's criminal background came to light, they would remove her from his custody. The social worker, Ms. Patricia Williams, had been professional but thorough, asking detailed questions about Lily's living situation, education, and medical care. She had also inquired about Vincent's background and his ability to provide a stable home environment. Who reported it? Vincent asked, though he suspected he already knew. The social worker wouldn't say, but Elena hesitated. She mentioned that the report came with detailed information about your business activities. Someone with inside knowledge. Vincent nodded grimly. Even with Moretti in a coma, the old man's network was still working to destroy him. But this attack was different. More personal, more devastating than any bullet or bomb. They were trying to take away the one thing that had given his life meaning. What do we do, senor? Vincent looked out his office window at Lily, who was reading in the garden under Elena's watchful eye. The little girl who had given him purpose was now in danger because of him. The irony was bitter. In trying to protect her, he had made her a target. We fight, he said quietly. But this time we fight in courtrooms instead of warehouses. Get me the best family lawyer in the city. If they want to take her away from me, they're going to have to prove I'm not fit to care for her. As Vincent began planning his legal strategy, he realized that this might be the most important battle of his life. He had faced down rival crime families, survived assassination attempts, and built an empire from nothing. But none of that would matter if he couldn't protect one little girl who had become his whole world. The war for Lily's future was just beginning, and Vincent intended to win it, no matter what it cost him. 6 months later, Vincent sat in the oak-paneled courtroom, his hands clasped tightly as Judge Margaret Chen reviewed the final custody documents. The courtroom was a study in contrasts, the formal dignity of the legal system set against the very real human drama playing out within its walls. Beside him, Lily fidgeted in her best dress, her small hand occasionally reaching for his when the legal proceedings became too overwhelming. The battle for Lily's custody had been the most challenging fight of Vincent's life, more complex and emotionally draining than any territorial war or business negotiation. The state had brought everything they could against him. His criminal record, his associations, even testimony from former enemies who painted him as a dangerous man unfit to raise a child. The prosecution had been relentless, bringing in expert witnesses who testified about the psychological damage that could result from exposing a child to criminal activity. They had presented evidence of Vincent's past violence, his connections to organized crime, and the inherent dangers of his lifestyle. The assistant district attorney, an ambitious young woman named Sarah Mitchell, had painted a picture of Vincent as an irredeemable criminal who posed a constant threat to Lily's well-being. But Vincent had fought back with equal determination and resources that few defendants could match. He had opened his books to court-appointed auditors, proving that his legitimate businesses now comprised the majority of his income. The transformation had been gradual but real. Over the past months, he had systematically distanced himself from the more violent aspects of his organization, delegating those responsibilities to trusted lieutenants while focusing on legitimate enterprises. He had submitted to psychological evaluations, home inspections, and interviews with child welfare experts. Dr. Elizabeth Hartman, a renowned child psychologist, had spent weeks evaluating both Vincent and Lily, ultimately concluding that their bond was genuine and beneficial to the child's development. Most importantly, he had gradually distanced himself from the more violent aspects of his organization, delegating those responsibilities to trusted lieutenants while focusing on the alliance's legitimate operations. The Chicago crime families had evolved under his leadership, becoming more like a business consortium than a traditional criminal organization. The character witnesses who testified on Vincent's behalf had been impressive. Community leaders, business partners, even some law enforcement officials who spoke about his efforts to reduce violence in his territory. Elena's testimony had been particularly powerful, describing the transformation she had witnessed in both Vincent and Lily over the past months. "Mr. Torino," Judge Chen said, looking up from the papers, "this court has reviewed all the evidence presented over the past 6 months. We've heard testimony from teachers, social workers, medical professionals, and character witnesses." Vincent held his breath. Everything he had worked for, everything that mattered, came down to this moment. The months of legal preparation, the character witnesses, the psychological evaluations, all of it would be meaningless if the judge decided that his past made him unfit to be a father. "While your past is complicated," the judge continued, "the evidence clearly shows that Lily has thrived in your care. Her academic progress has been remarkable, her physical and emotional health has improved dramatically, and every professional who has evaluated her has testified that she is happy, secure, and loved." Lily squeezed Vincent's hand, her eyes bright with hope. The little girl had been remarkably resilient throughout the legal proceedings, but Vincent could see the strain in her young face. The uncertainty had been difficult for both of them. Furthermore, Judge Chen added, the court recognizes that people can change, and that a child's best interests must be our primary concern. The evidence shows that Mr. Torino has made significant changes to his lifestyle and business practices, demonstrating a genuine commitment to providing a stable, nurturing environment for Lily. The judge paused, looking directly at Vincent. "However, this custody arrangement comes with conditions. You will submit to regular home inspections. Lily will continue her counseling sessions, and any evidence of criminal activity or endangerment will result in immediate removal of the child from your custody. Therefore, this court grants Vincent Torino full legal custody of Lily Marie Torino." The courtroom erupted in quiet celebration as Vincent's legal team smiled and Lily threw her arms around his neck. But Vincent barely heard the congratulations or felt the embraces. All he could focus on was the little girl in his arms, the child who had saved his life and given him a reason to become a better man. "We did it, Mr. Vincent," Lily whispered in his ear. "We're really family now." "We were always family, kiddo. Now it's just official." Vincent's voice was thick with emotion as he held her close, feeling the weight of responsibility and love that came with being her legal father. As they left the courthouse, Vincent reflected on how much his life had changed. The alliance of crime families had evolved into something unprecedented, a cooperative organization that focused more on legitimate business ventures and community protection than traditional criminal activities. Vincent's reputation had shifted from feared enforcer to respected community leader, though he knew that some aspects of his past would always follow him. The transformation hadn't been easy. Some of his old associates had questioned his new direction, viewing his focus on legitimacy as weakness. There had been challenges to his authority, attempts by rivals to exploit what they saw as his softening. But Vincent had navigated these challenges with the same strategic thinking that had made him successful in the criminal world, using diplomacy where possible and decisive action when necessary. The Moretti threat had ended when Salvatore died in the hospital 3 months earlier, his conspiracy dying with him. Most of his former soldiers had either joined other organizations or left Chicago entirely. The few who remained loyal to his memory had learned to avoid Vincent's territory after several pointed conversations. "Mr. Vincent," Lily said as they walked down the courthouse steps, "can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever miss it?" "The old way, I mean. When you didn't have to worry about custody hearings and social workers and all that?" Vincent considered the question seriously. There had been a simplicity to his old life, a clarity that came from operating in a world of absolute power and immediate consequences. Decisions had been straightforward, loyalty was rewarded, betrayal was punished, and strength was the only currency that mattered. But that simplicity had come at a cost: isolation, constant danger, and a soul-deep loneliness that he hadn't even recognized until Lily had shown him what family could feel like. The old Vincent had been powerful but empty, respected but unloved. "No," he said finally. "I don't miss it. The old way was easier in some ways, but it was also empty. You taught me that there are things worth more than power or respect. You taught me that protecting someone you love is more important than being feared by people you don't." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction. "Because I like you better this way." You smile more now. It was true. Vincent had found himself laughing more, enjoying simple pleasures that he had never allowed himself before. Reading bedtime stories, helping with homework, attending school plays. These ordinary moments had become the highlights of his days. That evening, the mansion hosted a celebration dinner that would have been unthinkable in Vincent's previous life. Elena had prepared a feast, and the guests included not just Vincent's closest associates, but also Lily's tutor, several neighbors, and even the social worker who had initially investigated their case and had become an unexpected ally. The dining room, which had once hosted tense business meetings and negotiations between dangerous men, now rang with the laughter of children and the warm conversation of friends who had become family. Dr. Martinez, Lily's tutor, regaled the table with stories of her students' remarkable progress, while Elena beamed with pride as guests complimented her cooking. As Vincent watched Lily laugh with her friends and saw the genuine warmth in the faces around his table, he realized that he had achieved something far more valuable than criminal empire. He had built a real family, a real community, a real life. The mansion that had once been a fortress against the world had become a home that welcomed it. The transformation extended beyond his personal life. The alliance he had forged between the crime families had evolved into something resembling a legitimate business consortium. They still operated in gray areas of the law, but their focus had shifted toward legal enterprises, construction, waste management, security services, and real estate development. Violence, while not entirely eliminated, had become a last resort rather than a first option. Later that night, as he tucked Lily into bed in her room filled with books and toys and all the things a child should have, she looked up at him with those wise brown eyes that had seen too much but still held hope. "Mr. Vincent, do you think my real parents would be proud of who I've become?" The question hit him like a physical blow. In all their time together, Lily had rarely mentioned her biological parents, and Vincent had never pressed her for details about her life before the streets. He knew only fragments, that she had been 5 when she lost them, that she had somehow survived 3 years on her own, that she carried scars both visible and hidden from that time. "I think," he said carefully, sitting on the edge of her bed. That any parent would be incredibly proud to have a daughter as brave, smart, and kind as you are. But Lily, I need you to know something. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does, choice does, and I choose you, every single day. I choose you too, she said sleepily. You're the best dad I could have asked for. The word dad still caught him off guard sometimes. Vincent Torino, who had built his reputation on being untouchable and emotionally distant, had been completely undone by one little girl's unconditional love. She had seen past his reputation, past his scars, past his carefully constructed walls, and had somehow found the man he could be rather than the man he had been. As Vincent turned off the lights and closed the door, he felt a peace that had eluded him his entire adult life. The little girl who had tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Don't start the car," had saved him in ways she would never fully understand. She had given him redemption, purpose, and most importantly, love. The transformation hadn't been without cost. Some of his old associates had drifted away, unable to accept his new priorities. There had been financial losses as he divested from certain illegal enterprises. His reputation in the criminal underworld had shifted from feared predator to respected elder statesman, still dangerous when necessary, but no longer driven by the hunger for power that had once defined him. But as he settled into his study to review the legitimate business reports that now filled his evenings, Vincent smiled, knowing that the most important battle of his life had been won not with violence or intimidation, but with love. The alliance continued to function smoothly under his guidance, but it was no longer the center of his universe. That honor belonged to a little girl who was probably already dreaming of the book she would read tomorrow. The man who had once been known as the Viper was gone, replaced by someone better, a father, a protector, a man who had learned that true strength came not from inspiring fear, but from inspiring trust. The criminal empire he had built still existed, but it had evolved into something more sustainable, more legitimate, more worthy of the legacy he wanted to leave for his daughter. In the end, the little orphan girl hadn't just saved the Mafia king from an ambush, she had saved his soul. And in doing so, she had shown him that redemption was possible for anyone willing to choose love over power, family over fear, and hope over the darkness that had once consumed him. Vincent Torino had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life without even knowing it. A home, a family, and a reason to be better than he had ever thought possible. The little girl who had warned him not to start the car had given him something far more valuable than his life. She had given him a future worth living. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in the power of unexpected bonds and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit that notification bell and let us know in the comments which part of Vincent and Lily's journey moved you the most. Your support means everything to us.